I don't know how they did this, but they managed to give Megacolony a brand new boss unit. That's actually good. Yeah. Oh, and also we got some new Granblue support, which is mighty spicy. Stand up, Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we got once again more V clan collection reveals. This time the two clans that we're going to tackle are the reveals for Granblue and Megacolony. And we already knew that Granblue is going to do this weird thing with triggers, and let me tell you, it is actually really spicy, because not only are these triggers going to give inherent shield value, they're going to passively increase the power of our units on the board. And we actually get something that can be referenced as drive milling or trigger mills or something like that, but you will understand once we get over the card reveals. And then for Megacolony, you probably saw the title and then the intro also explained a little bit. We got stunning from hand, which is kind of ridiculous because it's on par to what we got at the end of G era with locking from hand. This can be really dangerous and can be very powerful, so I think Megacolony is going to be in a really good spot after this set. But before all that, let's first take a look at the new Granblue card, and we're gonna start with a new grade 1, which is Sea Strolling Banshee. And Sea Strolling Banshee has two separate skills, from which one is auto. When this unit is placed on the Vanguard circle, search your deck for up to one card, discard it, and shuffle your deck. So this is a really nice effect because it gives us a solid on-right target for our first grade 1, but it gives us a free mill that doesn't cost us a soul blast or counter blast or whatever. So it's a free mill that can start your engine. And this is super generic as it allows you to be splashed in any deck, and that mill is somewhat on par on Colombard because Colombard can also search something from deck and mill it, but it can then call something, but it also costs a counter blast. So depending on the scenario, this can actually be a really good card to set up your engine, and definitely with the new duo cards because we need specific cards in the drop zone, and with Banshee we can set that up right on turn 1. But she also has a secondary effect, which is auto and Vanguard circle. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked or boost, you may discard 2 cards from the top of your deck. Then, if one or more trigger units were discarded, retire this unit and draw a card. So it's effectively more free mill that you have access to whenever, which is great if you need to put more cards in the drop zone. And it can potentially just stack itself off to draw a new card if you hit a trigger, which is nice if you need that extra draw. Now, interesting enough, this is battle phase milling, so we can use this to potentially also facilitate multi-attack because we have a grade 3 called King Tentacle, which basically can call itself to the field the moment it gets sent from the deck to the drop directly. So yeah, that is a possibility. I'm not gonna say it's a good combo, but it's an option. But the main kicker for Granblue lies in the grade 2 and the grade 3. And first we're going to take a look at the grade 2, and you can already see where this deck is going. As here we have the new grade 2, Pirate Belle Peanut Blank. And Peanut Blank has the effect, auto from drop, when your young pirate noble Pinot Noir, aka the grade 3, on your Vanguard circle attacks, cost, counter +1, retire a rearguard, draw a card, and call this card to your front row rearguard circle. So this effectively gives us multi-attack in combination with the correct grade 3, which is great, and it resurrects itself, so we don't have to rely on other cards to facilitate this. The only thing that you need to set up is actual units on the board. Now, this interaction does mean we don't have to waste units in the front row, because we can attack with the units in the front row, and then immediately retire them with the skill of Pinot Blank to call her to the circle of the unit that we just retired, so we don't overcall on our units, which is fine. But it also then means that we cannot really rely effectively on cards like Ghost Ships and Skull Dragons because they retire themselves after they attacked. And if that's the case, then we don't really have good targets for Pinot Blank to sack off. Yes, we can sack off the boosters, but that then might mean that we don't have the boosters next turn, or maybe we didn't use the boosters in the first attack wave. So there are things you need to weigh here to know what type of cards you can include in the deck or not. But at the very least, there is a multi-attack engine available with only these 2 cards. But on top of it, it also has another effect, which is continues our Rearguard Circle and Guardian Circle. This unit cannot be attacked, and this unit gets shield plus 5k for every free trigger units in your drop. So this can be a beefy shield, as it can easily be 10k shield, 15k shield, but during the late game, it can potentially get a maximum of plus 25k shield if you have 15 triggers in your drop, which makes it a 30k shield interceptor. And as soon as she can resurrect herself from the drop onto the field during your battle phase, that means during your opponent's turn you always have these beefy interceptors available to you to just block big attacks. And as soon as she cannot be attacked, this can potentially interact well with Protect 2, as it gives her at least some inherent protection, which is nice. But this is just the beginning of the actual multi-attack package of the Pinot Noir or Pinot Blanc combo, because if we take a look at the Grade 3, we can see where the actual offensive capability lies, because yes, we can multi-attack, but she's just 9k and we need to rely on our boosters. Yes, we can use Protect 2 to potentially up the counters, but that's not fast enough to make all the attacks worth it. Luckily, we got Pinot Noir for that, because here we've got the brand new Grade 3 Young Pirate Noble Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir has the effect Continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, all of your front row units get power plus 5k for every 3 trigger units in your drop. So remember what we just said with the Grade 2, how she gains a buttload of shield for every 3 triggers in her drop zone? This is the exact same thing, but then with power. And it gives to all your front rows, including the Vanguards, including the Pinot Blancs that are going to be superior called with their own effect. That's a lot of power, because it probably is going to be an easy plus 5 or 10k, which is nice, especially on the first Grade 3 turn. But during those later turns, that can be plus 15, plus 20, or even plus 25k on every single attack, and you're going to attack potentially 5 times a turn. And if we're gonna use the Banshee combo, where we have a Banshee on this 5th attack, and we're going to mill 2 cards, and we happen to hit a King Tentacle, we can call it the King Tentacle to the other already rested Pinot Blanc, and then have 6 attacks that have plus 15 or plus 25k power. And the King Tentacle already gets another 10k from its own skill. That's pretty good! But that isn't everything, because Pinot Noir has something on top of this, because it also has the effect Auto Vanguard Circle. Once a turn, when your Pirate Bell Pinot Blanc is placed on the Vanguard Circle during your turn, cost Soul Blast 1, discard 2 cards from the top of your deck, and activate all trigger effects for the discarded cards. This is basically 2 mills that somewhat substitutes as drive checks, because you can activate your triggers. We've seen this with the other reveals. We had this for the Bermuda Triangle. Susanoo is somewhat similar as this, where we can activate these pseudo drive checks that allows us to still get trigger effects even if they don't hit in actual drive checks. And this is great, because not only does this synergize just inherently with Pinot Blanc and Pinot Noir's multi-attack combo, but because we're milling more cards and we are actively searching for triggers here, that then will then fuel into the increase of shield value as well as power value to the board when we're just attacking with Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc. So this is actually a really interesting combo, and because it's just super generic, we can splash in anything, and if there are cards with low base power but a very interesting on-attack skill or a good skill to have, but it wasn't desirable because it wasn't a strong beater, Pinot Noir makes all those units strong beaters. So maybe we can see different cards now being run because of the different application, and because Ghost Ships and Skull Dragons will probably be less desirable with a deck like this, because you need the units to stick on the board as long as possible to get value of your multi-tech engine. Now, the Granblue reveals are actually really interesting on their own, but I think the Megacolony reveals are just that little bit more spicy, because we got the new Giraffa reveals, and we're going to see a lot of interesting skills. And we're going to start off with this Grade 1, which is Pupa Mutant Giraffa. And Pupa Mutant Giraffa has the effect Auto, when this unit is placed on the Vanguard Circle, cost, discard a normal unit from your hand, search your deck for up to 1 card with Giraffa in its card name and same grade as the card discarded for this cost, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So basically, discard a Grade 1, Grade 2, or Grade 3, and depending on what you discarded, you can search a Giraffa of that same grade. Basically, a searcher for the archetype, which is great because you're going to need those different grades, as you're going to see with how the Grade 3 Giraffa works. So this is a nice way to increase the engine overall. But then it also has a skill, Auto. This cost is reduced by the Soul Blast 1 for each of your opponent's rearguards as rest in the same column as this unit. When this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, cost Soul Blast 2 and draw a card. Now, this is actually a really interesting skill, because Soul Blast 2 to draw a card in itself isn't actually that bad, but within how the Giraffa engine works, you don't want to overcommit on your soul, so this isn't that ideal. But if your opponent has just 1 unit in the same column where you place this Grade 1, it is Soul Blast 1, and that's actually pretty decent. A Soul Blast 1 for a draw is actually really good value. But then if you can set up the field where your opponent has a entire column filled with rested units, yeah, then you just have on-place draw. Then this literally becomes an actual cantrip card, which is pretty powerful in any card game, as it is just generating more card value for free. So, yeah, I like this grade 1. It set up your engine, and it can be a really good draw engine as well on top of everything. But then if we go over to the grade 2, we see the powerhouse of this new deck, as we got Elite Mutant Giraffa, which has the skills Auto Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle. Once a turn, when this unit attacks, cost counter +1, and this unit gets power +5k until the end of turn for each of your opponent's rearguards at rest. If your opponent has 1 or less rearguards at stand, draw a card. So probably in most instances it's going to be a counter +1 to draw a card, and it gains an X amount of power, because your opponent will very unlikely let more than 1 rearguard stand unless there is something they are doing to try to counterplay you, but that's that's really awkward to them as well, as they're limiting their offensive capabilities. And you have the options to just stun their units even if they're left them at resting position, so there's ways to combat this as well. But more importantly, that power gain is just an extra added bonus on top of it, and that power gain can scale pretty high because it can be a maximum of 25k power. And you can say, well, your opponent can just not call units, or only units that remove themselves from the field. And yes, that is true, but actually not so much, because Giraffa has a countermeasure against this tactic, which is kind of nutty, but we will get there in a second, because this grade 2 also has another effect, which continues a rearguard circle. All of your opponent's rearguards in the same column as this unit cannot intercept or move to other rearguard circles. So this is a very annoying skill to deal with your opponent, because if they have grade 1s in the front row, or they have the grade 2 in the back row for some reason, they're stuck there if this unit stays on the board, which is actually really annoying. And them not being able to intercept is also good, because you want to have your opponent to have as much units rested on the field, because let's say, for example, you have 2 of these Giraffas in the front row. If you attack with 1, it gets the power boost of the 2 rested grade 2s in the front row, but then your opponent can intercept, and then the second Giraffa won't get the power gain. So by having this block intercept capabilities built in the card, that means if you have 2 of them, they both get the full power gain, which is really good, because you're going to need that to push for gain. But now you might think to yourself, well, now how am I supposed to get that +20 or that mythical +25k power onto my Giraffa? We can do that thanks to this grade 3 Evil Armor General Giraffa. And this Giraffa has the effect Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, cost counter +1 and put a rearguard into the soul. Your opponent chooses 2 cards from their hand, and they call them to the rearguard circle as rest, and those called units cannot stand during their next stand phase. The auto abilities of your opponent's cards do not activate from this call. This is actually the nuts. Like, it is ripping 2 cards from your opponent's hand. Yes, it costs you counterblast, and yes, it costs you a unit from the field because you need to put something in the soul. But that putting unit into the soul is actually fueling your engine, as we're going to see in a second. And it can also fuel the grade 1 Giraffa if we need a Soul Blast one for drawing power. So you're effectively just playing a counterblast to generate soul and ripping 2 cards from your opponent's hands, which does absolutely nothing. They are at rest, they cannot stand next turn, and they cannot even use their auto ability. And if we have the right grade 2s in the front row, they cannot even intercept with them, so they're just wasted cards that they cannot utilize anymore, and you're gonna benefit from it because your grade 2 Giraffas suddenly get an extra 10k power if they resolve their skill. Which is kind of good. But then on top of it, it also has another effect, which is just a cherry on top, which is continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, this unit gets power +5k for each card with Giraffa in its different card name in your soul. If you have 2 or more cards with different card names and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, the original critical of this unit becomes 2. So this is the reason why you want to have those different Giraffa cards in your soul, and you can achieve that by just riding. But you can also achieve it by its first ability, which you always want to resolve to just screw with your opponent, so you are also advancing the game state of its second effect, which then gives your Vanguard another extra 5k power, and potentially that extra critical. And in total, you can give him an extra additional 15k power, because you can have the grade 1, the grade 2, and the grade 3 in your soul. on your first grade 3 turn, you can have all 3 in your soul, because you can write the grade 1, write the grade 2, and then call a second copy of the grade 3, which you then put into the soul via its auto ability. Now, do you want to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe just riding him to gain the protect marker next turn might be more beneficial. It depends on the scenario and how long you can stall the game for that. It will matter, because if the game is very fast, maybe you cannot get away with the play, but if you can, go ahead. And honestly, because these Giraffa cards are so generic, it allows it to be used with whatever engine is available to Megacolony. Because we could just use cards like Megacolony Lancer, which is another interceptor blocker, and it gains power from rested units. And we have multiple cards that can stun cards when they are called to the field, or when your opponent just decided to not use them for attacks to counterplay you, which you then can punish. But what I think is a more interesting approach, and I don't know if we have this in the battle phase, but I think we do, is combining it with the cradle mechanic. Because if we can use Giraffa's effect to force our opponent to call to units at rest that cannot stand, if we then immediately can put 2 cradle markers on those units, now your opponent is immediately de-incentivized to call new units on top of it. Because if they do, they're hard minusing themselves by just trying to put up offensive, while you are just plussing and plussing and plussing. And yeah, Megacolony is actually looking kind of scary right now, and I'm very curious of how far this deck can go, because it's so generic that the options are almost endless. And with it said, that's all the reveals that we got for Granblue and Megacolony. Now, surprisingly, these reveals are actually pretty damn good, and I think they could actually be legit top tier contenders or high tier contenders in the current environment, just by the sheer fact that these decks that we got, these new strategies, have a concrete game plan and a potential good finishing tactic. And on top of it, they're pretty generic, which lends them to use the entire toolbox mechanic of their clans. And yes, I know that might sound strange when we're talking about Megacolony, but even Giraffa can actually use the Megacolony engine pretty well, because they can utilize either the cradle mechanic, which I already explained in this video. They can even use the generic stun mechanic to just combat their weakness or their anti-strategy game plan. They can maybe even use something with the machining, or even potentially with the milling mechanic, because you can just be super annoying against your opponent and just keep milling the cards from the deck while also ripping cards from their hands and just say no to their game plan, which sounds pretty awesome to me. But that said, I'm very curious of what you guys think of these new reveals, so let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of the new Giraffa reveals, or Pin on Blank or Pin on War, because there are definitely some fan favorite cards for certain players. Yes, I know, Giraffa does have its fan favorites, not that many, but they're out there. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these cards. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron as well. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!